Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this Facebook Live. I have with me Sarah Adams, who is an elementary teacher all the way from Canada. And I'm very happy to be with you today, Sarah. We have connected through Instagram and started to do a lot of stuff together on Instagram. I'm very happy to have you tonight here to talk to parents here in this conference about your own childhood as a Montessori child and what you do now. You also a Montessori teacher now, and you have a little girl with 2, and so basically you have started to do more Montessori at home as well with her. So you started with the elementary years down towards the babies and toddlers, and you create as well beautiful Montessori mobiles and baby materials that you sell online. So that's a lot, Yeah. when we say it like that, right? And very happy to have you with us tonight to chat about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I feel so honored to be here.
Well, you are definitely welcome. So, for those who don't know who you are, would you like to introduce yourself and what you do and, your family, whatever you want to say about you to start with?
Sure. So I'm Sarah, and I live in Vancouver, Canada. I was born and raised here, and I did go to Montessori from age 3 to 12. And now I am an upper elementary teacher. And when my daughter was born, I became more interested in birth to 3 Montessori. So I did a little bit of assistant training with that. And like you said, I've also become a little bit obsessed with making mobiles. So I started giving them to my friends, and then eventually I started selling a little bit on Etsy and at Market.
I find that so difficult to make the Montessori mobile. When my son was little, I still don't know how you are making the goby. It's still
I think you have to not be pregnant or need it for your own child for it to work, because I couldn't do it for Layla. I bought all the materials when I was pregnant, and my mom and I tried, and I kind of gave up. And we used other types of mobiles, but ever since I've not had it for my own child, it seems very easy. So I think that's the trick.
Okay, that's not being under pressure to make it.
Exactly.
All right. So you just said that basically you went to a Montessori school yourself. And so I wanted to ask you if you remember that time as a child, and what would be, what is your best memory of that time as a child? Or maybe you don't remember those early years, but you went up to elementary, so that maybe that part that you remember more. Just talk to us about that. How is it to be a Montessori child?
Well, of course, I don't know any different, but I remember the most important part for me was seeing my friends. And I know that we had a lot of freedom in our school that was different than my friends who went to non-Montessori schools. So we had a lot of outings. We were given a lot of responsibility. We helped with younger students. We helped around the school. And it made me just feel like I was part of a community. And I'm sure a lot of schools are able to do that, but I know it's really built into the Montessori philosophy. So I do remember some of the materials, and I loved using the math materials. That was so much fun. But the most important part was just the social aspect.
I guess I just seeing it through my youngest eyes, because now it is in the elementary stage of his Montessori education. He goes to his own school. I can see that, the vertical grouping, how important it is. Obviously, it's important with a 3 to 6 years old classroom where I used to teach. But as he's growing up, having those older friends in the same classroom is so important. It's like having those big brothers and people who are going to inspire him. And, the way they help each other, it's very lovely to witness through what he says about the school. And when we go to the school, and we can see that straight away, like his best friend is basically 9 years old. So he's very proud, that his 9 years old friend asked him to go over for a play date or for a sleepover. It's really not the same. I mean, it's like, and it's very impressive, for example, for my daughter, who is in mainstream education, that you can have children, friends who are older and younger. So I think that's good for her as well to see that.
Absolutely. That age grouping is so important. The older ones can help the younger, and then they get excited when they become the leaders, when they move up in that group. But my brother also went to preschool in Montessori, and his best friend my brother's 37, they met in preschool, and in Montessori preschool, and they were together all the way through. And we have friends that are older or younger that I still keep in contact with that are different ages, which I'm not sure every school would have that opportunity. I think it's really built into having that multi-age grouping, like you said.
Absolutely, yeah. And I do remember as a child, we were in a small school. So we had 2 years together because the school was too small. And I kept in touch with one of my friends who was younger than me. So, and we, at our age, it doesn't matter anymore. But at that time, it was like she was younger in my head, and we were friends. So yeah, it's something that I really value. I valued that as growing up, knowing that I was in a very small school, and we had that opportunity as well. And it was not Montessori at all, but just was, a small village school.
Right.
And so what do you think? You said that, but as growing up, and after you have completed your Montessori cycle of education, I guess, and then you transition to, I think, men's state education for high school.
Yes.
And then what do you think stayed with you, when you had to choose? Obviously you chose to be a Montessori teacher, so somehow it's really stayed with you. But do you think, you were more able to make choices growing up? Do you feel that you were maybe more independent? If you compare yourself maybe to some friends who didn't go to a Montessori school when they were younger, do you feel that there was something a bit different? What did it bring you, basically, at the end of it?
Yes, I think, the big thing for me was I know I understood math differently than other people understood math. So I remember being in grade 8 and 13 and drawing out what would have probably been, I don't know, the stamp game or checkerboard. And I drew it out for my friends. And now I get it, because a lot of the times there's no hands-on learning with math. It's like an abstract concept, and students are just expected to know how to do it. And so I do remember doing that with my friends. And then in terms of my study skills, I think having the experience of having responsibility and independence, but also having expectations of when things are due, that helped me when I went into high school to manage all of my courses and my homework. I wasn't used to someone saying, now it's language time, this is due in 30 minutes. It was, these are your expectations for the week. You figure out how you're going to do it. And of course they were there to help me, but I had to finish it by the expected time. And so when I went to high school, I think that helped me to be a better student.
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. And that's something I'm starting to see as well with my own son. Start slowly, obviously, because that's the first year of elementary, but they do have, that planning, that they are in charge of what they're going to learn that week. And I had to observe my son in the classroom. And so it was very lovely to witness that, like, the teacher just showed them on the board, that they had that presentation with her at some point during the morning, and they were, my son and his friends were doing a project together. So she said to them, well, when it's that time on the clock, you're going to have your presentation. So when do you need to tidy up? How much time do you need? And so on, obviously starting slowly because they're just 6 years old. They were both just 6 years old, but it was very lovely to witness, because basically they were keeping doing the project, and then they were asking each other, do you think we still have time? They were checking the time, and then at some point one of them said, okay, I think we need now to tidy up. And so they started to tidy up and take the little diary to go for the presentation. So the teacher was just making the presentation ready on the mat, but she didn't have to reminding them. She didn't have to say, no, it's time to tidy up. No, it's time for you to come. So they knew, they were dealing with the times themselves. So it was lovely to witness, and definitely something that need to be bring into the home as well, the house. And I think that's quite important to understand what they are able to do. If they're able to do that in the classrooms, they're definitely able to do that here, right?
They should be able to. They're always different at home than at school. But I think that thing that you said is the trust. The teacher didn't say, I'm counting down or whatever. she trusted that your son and his friend would be able to remember the time and that, you know, they would do it. And I think that time management piece is so important. A lot of the times people come into elementary and they say, oh, in Montessori, they can do whatever they want, right? That's what you do in Montessori, whatever they want. And that's somewhat true, but it's not whatever they want. They can do it perhaps when they want to, in the order they want to. Maybe they can show it in a different way, but there still are expectations that they need to be able to meet. And with that independence, that responsibility, that trust from the adult, they're able to do it even at 6. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing to witness, because I didn't know anything. I don't know. I still feel that I don't know anything about the elementary stage. I know we've chatted about that, so I'm still discovering it and reading a lot about it and really enjoying learning through my son's teacher, because we have this parenting conference, which are amazing in the school to teach us, you know, to show us what they are doing basically. So I think I'm not mistaken as well that your mother is also a Montessori teacher, right?
Yes. So my mom is retired now, but so when I was born, she was a resource teacher, which in Vancouver means that you work with students who have English as a second language, or maybe they have some learning difficulties, or they might be gifted. So she was a resource teacher. And so I think when I was born, probably from 0 to about 2.5, she didn't know much about Montessori. I asked her about it. She said she had never heard of it. But I think probably growing up, she did things in a Montessori way without knowing it, right? I think a lot of people do that. So I remember her having pictures of our pants and our shirts on our dresser, for example. So we would know where to go and get it. We had a lot of responsibility, but also a lot of freedom and trust. We were able to do a lot of practical life activities, which I don't think she knew she was doing practical life, but we were involved with the home kind of practical life activities. And then when I was around 2.5, she said that she started looking for preschool for me. And she wanted me in something that would challenge me a little bit academically. And so she stumbled upon a Montessori preschool down the street from my grandma's house. And she went for an observation and she fell in love with it. And luckily I got in. Back then, this was a long time ago, there were only a few Montessori preschools. Now there are probably 100 in Vancouver. And so luckily I got in there. And then she thought, well, what next? After preschool, where is my daughter going to go? So she got together with a group of parents, and they went to the school board, and they were able to open up the first public Montessori elementary school. And then she started researching about Montessori, and she started training. So probably when I was around 4, she started doing her Montessori training. And then I went to this public Montessori school, and she waited for me to graduate before she started teaching there. And then she taught there for probably 20 years. So,
wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So she's done a lot in the Montessori world, and now she helps with Montessori teacher training.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So maybe your daughter will be a Montessori teacher.
Maybe. I think it runs in her blood, but there's no pressure. But yes, she might be.
So do you think, you said that your mom was doing those things like without not knowing that it was Montessori. So obviously maybe why she was attracted by the Montessori school when she first visited it, because it was like making sense for her. Right. And that's something that I hear a lot, like from parents saying that, well, I just discovered Montessori, but I think I was doing it anyway. Yeah. And it makes sense because obviously Montessori didn't create something out of nowhere, right? She observed. That's something that I've said, I think, in every call this week, and that most guests have discussed about with me. But basically, Maria Montessori observed the children, and how they were acting naturally when they were not, controlled by the adult or by the environment or by or expectations, by the educational systems, basically. So basically, she just uncovered, the natural laws of development and how children were supposed to act and were able to the best way for the children to be nurtured and to grow, basically. Right. So obviously, if you really follow your own child, in a natural way, and for some parents it's like obvious for them, to respect the children from the start and to understand that a child has some specific needs, and that we have to adapt our adult life to our children and to their rhythm, and that seems natural for some parents to do that from the start, then yeah, in a way, we all do Montessori when we do that, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I agree. And I think, like you said, a lot of people probably don't know that they're doing Montessori at home. They just are. That's just their natural. They're giving their children space. They're trusting them. They're involving them in their home activities. They don't overstimulate them with too many toys, you know, so they're doing it already, but they're probably, like you said, surprised when they learn about Montessori.
So you became a teacher. So do you want to talk to us about that? Why you made that choice? Obviously, that's probably because, you know, the Montessori education was so great for you that you wanted to, you know, transmit that as well. So just talk to me about that. You know, why did you choose to become a Montessori teacher?
I wasn't always sure I wanted to be a teacher. I actually wanted to do something with art history based. That was my major. But then I realized there's not a lot of jobs that I can get in the art history field. You know, there were some, but very specific. But all the way along, I had to do volunteer work, either for high school, or I had to do it to get into university, or I had to do it for something. And I always worked with children. I worked with my mom's students. I also worked with other schools, and I really enjoyed it. So then I started thinking, well, maybe teaching could be the right thing for me. We have a lot of teachers in my family, and I saw how much my mom loved it. It was exhausting, but she loved it. And so I sort of started taking the courses to go that way if I wanted to. I wasn't really sure. And then once I was in the teacher program and my mom was working with the training, she just said, why don't you take a couple courses with us, start the training and see if you're interested. So I started the training and I fell in love with it again. And I just decided might as well be a Montessori teacher. And so I've taught everything here. Public school starts at kindergarten. We don't have a 3-year grouping for kindergarten students. So kindergarten's by itself, but I've taught everything from kindergarten to grade 6. So 5 to 11-year-olds. And every age group is so special in its own way, and I love it. But it's definitely the right career for me.
Is there any Montessori school that caters for children from 3 to 6?
Not public. There are lots of preschools in Vancouver, but they're just not public schools.
All right. So just to fit within the public system, it has to start with kindergarten.
Yes.
So it's difficult to have that kind of vertical grouping from 3 to 6, I suppose.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So does it change the dynamic of the classroom, do you think, or does it impact? Yeah.
I mean, it's not perfect. And with our city, we can't even have 5s and 6s together. It's just kindergarten altogether. So you have 22 students, 22 5-year-olds all in one class. It is difficult. It's, you definitely see why a 3-year cycle is definitely better. It's doable. It's still fun. They still use the materials, but it's not, I don't think, as successful as it could be if there was a multi-age grouping.
Yeah. Well, I think in many countries we are confronted to having to negotiate what we can do.
Yes.
And here in the UK, children start school at 4.
Oh, okay.
That's only from 5, okay, to be in education, okay, from 5. If you don't want to send your children to school, then you officially home educate, I guess. But when they turn 4, the next September after they're 4, they can start reception. So that's probably the equivalent of kindergarten. And so, in the same way, the preschools here have children between 2 to 4. It's not the 3 to 6 years old cycle. It's very different. Right. Because you have some children who are very young, who are under 3, some of them still, in nappies, some of them still put some small stuff in their mouths. Yeah. So with the small materials, obviously the Montessori materials is a bit tricky. And, it's difficult for them to adapt to a work cycle and to the rules of the classroom. So, the beginning of the year in the Montessori preschool, it's very challenging for sure.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And then when they just start to be normalized, as we say, we have to leave for school. So
right.
we rarely see, a fully functioning classroom because of that. But still, I think that's better than nothing. And that gives them, if we focus more on sensory health and practical life, because that's what we would focus on when they are between 2 to 4. And when they start with us more around 2 and 3, then, it's still very, very valuable, I think. And that's just better than nothing. And And well, there are quite a lot of private schools as well, so that's an option if you want to go to the whole system of private education. But there is nothing that is public and Montessori here in the UK, unfortunately. So and then your daughter Layla is 2.
Yes.
So how was it, to transition from being a teacher in the classroom to being a mother, which is quite different? And I know that you kind of try to find a way as well to learn about those early years and Montessori as well, and how to implement at home, how to set up your space. That was kind of a learning curve. I think you said that to me before. So if you want to explain a bit your journey with that.
Yeah, it was a big learning curve. I assumed that because I worked through Montessori, I was a Montessori teacher, I was trained, I would know how to implement Montessori at home, the way that I saw on Pinterest or on Instagram. And so when Layla was born, I was shocked that I didn't know what to do. And I just looked at her and I was like, I don't know what to do with her. I don't know what her developmental stages should be. I don't know what the milestones should be. And I realized how little I really knew about birth to 3. And so then I started researching and going online and reading as much as I could. And I signed up for a course for birth to 3. And so I started learning a bit more. And now that she's, turning 3 in August, I finally feel comfortable with her stages. I haven't started looking at preschool ages yet, but, I definitely think that I assumed that I would be more knowledgeable than I was. And so that was a big wake-up call for me. So that was a big transition for sure.
Yeah, I think for anyone, becoming a parent is a huge transition.
Yeah.
And, no matter your background, it's going to be always different when it's your child.
Yes, absolutely.
Children in the classroom is so different. And I used to say that my children both came with me in the classroom. And for some people it was a bit odd, like they were thinking, because I was not making a huge income, because I still had to pay, partially for the tuition in the classroom. And for some people, they didn't understand, because they believe that, you're a teacher, you could do the same at home with them. But I used to say that it's so much easier to raise children, within a group.
Yes, definitely. That aren't your own children sometimes, right? They're different.
Yeah, so that was my vision. It was so much easier to be, to raise my children with my colleagues and within a group, and have that, vertical age grouping, and have that little group of children with my children, than to be alone at home. That was really my vision. That was so much easier. So that I really enjoyed that they were with me during the early years, part-time in the classroom and part-time at home. That was much easier for me, not to be just at home with them. That was my own.
That sounds lovely. That sounds amazing. I would have loved that.
Well, you'll see. Maybe she's going to go in elementary with you.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, definitely. That is a possibility for sure.
Yeah, and it's doable. I think, especially when they're growing up, when they are just 2 or 3, they might not understand, that mom has also to take care of the other children. But when they are in elementary, it's probably an age when that's easier to share the mom.
Definitely.
Okay, so basically, now you are mainly with the elementary children. So I'm so curious about the elementary stage, and I'm sure some of the parents here have older children or children transitioning from the early years to elementary. So if you don't mind to talk with us a bit about that elementary child, what would be, what are the main characteristics of that, plane of development, that second plane of development?
Sure. So the big difference is that they're still changing, they're still developing. Physically, they're not changing as much. So if you think of the first plane from a little bit like infant to a 6-year-old, that's a huge change. Those babies don't even sometimes look like, they don't look the same. They've changed dramatically. They've gone from not being able to even crawl to walking, jumping, skipping, talking. So the physical development is huge. From 6 to 12, you're not going to see as much physically in development, but there's a lot of intellectual, emotional, and social development. They also change a lot from, there might be a 4 or 5-year-old who loves cleaning, washing the dishes. They want to be part of the home. They want to make their bed. They love the practical life aspects. When they become, definitely around the ages I teach, they're not as tidy. They're messy because that's not what their main focus is. Their main focus is on the social aspect. So they will do chores. They will help in the classroom, but they're doing it to be part of a social group. They're doing it because they want to be members of that group and they want to contribute. They're not doing it in the same way that they would do at 3 to repeat a process and become masters at it. So that's a huge difference. The other thing is the imagination is now very important to a 6 to 12-year-old. So when we teach them big things, we can use their imagination to get that across. So if we teach about the coming of the universe, for example, that takes an imagination to understand, to even grasp those things. A 0 to 6 child probably can't grasp that, but when they start to get older, they can. And then the other thing is they really want to know why. Why, what is their role? Why do things happen? And then they can go deeper into it. They also are important in justice. They want to know if things are fair, why someone did it, should they have done it, should they have done it differently, was that fair? So there's a lot of, when they're in the lower elementary, it seems like tattling, but really they're trying to get feedback. Was that right? Was that wrong? What should you do? What are some other things? So definitely, and they're going from concrete to abstract. So if you can show the picture of the beads with the golden beads and then the stamp game and the beads. So the top picture is golden beads that the child would probably be introduced to in the primary class or preschool class. And so that is what we call concrete material. The golden beads, there are literally 1,000 golden beads in the 1,000 cube. You can count it. It's concrete. You can hold it. You can feel how heavy that is. And then they will move more abstract. So they will move to use something like the stamp game, which is right below. And those still have the numbers and they still would have like a color system, but it's more abstract. And then below, we just go to using the beads. So then we can do really, really big numbers and really big math using materials that we don't literally have to get thousands of cubes out. I can just use the beads to help me with that. So that's one thing. And then if you show the other picture with the stamp game. So this is a stamp game. This is the middle material that's in the first photo I showed. And this is a child doing division with the stamp game. So if they were in preschool, they would be using the golden beads and literally dividing up 8,000s. But because they're older and they understand those concrete experiences and concrete, I guess, the math terms, they're able to go more abstract. And then the last one, of those parts, this is what it would look like. That's 7/10. And then we can use this material that's definitely more abstract to show them how it corresponds to decimals. So this is just an example. Math is pretty easy of showing how we go from concrete at 6 years old and younger to very abstract to being able to do it on paper. So I'd say those are the biggest changes for the elementary child.
Yeah, and indeed, just last week we had the parenting conference in my son's school, and they showed us a checkerboard.
Yes.
And indeed we don't use. So she was talking about millions and hundreds, and being a 3 to 6 teacher, I was like confused with the beads because
Yeah.
It was not the same as the, short beat stays, but that was the same colors, but it's not,
Yes.
it's not the same. So I was quite confused. So I think I need to go back and double check that, because I couldn't grasp it, because basically I was still stuck into the more concrete aspect of the 3 to 6 materials, maths materials. But yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it makes sense when you show, the 1,000 cube and the other symbols that are more abstract. Now it makes sense.
Right.
I can see the transition clearly, and yeah, it's great to see. And I know one of the questions of the parents at that conference was, when are they going to start to do, we were understanding like the long division, for example, with all the beats, and but parents were asking, but when do they do that, on paper? When is it coming to do that on paper,
Right.
basically, or in their head?
Yes.
Probably not long division with millions, but basically, when do we tell them, it's time to take a paper, or does it come from them? Yeah.
So they'll get lessons. So they would go from, for example, the long division, they would do it first without worrying about writing it down. When they get comfortable, then the teacher will show them how to write down the steps and why we subtract and why we multiply. And then they really see it. I tell my class, materials are like training wheels on a bicycle. Once you get it, you don't need those training wheels. If you know how to write it on paper, you don't need the materials. But to get that understanding, I really see the big difference of students who come late into our program who have no Montessori experience. They can do the math on paper, but they don't understand it. So if I say, okay, but what does that mean? Well, I don't know. I learned you multiply, then you subtract, but I don't know what that means. And then I show them the material and they go, oh, now I get it. So, and they love the colors. It's like I tell them it's kind of like a secret club. We know the colors, but other people don't know the colors, and it really helps us. And they love that.
And so in your own experience, because you have children who comes late into the program.
Yeah.
So in your own experience, despite they add this kind of more abstract way of learning math, they're still able to grasp the concept if they are given the chance to manipulate the materials, even if they come late and have no prior experience. So it's it's great to know, because I know, so for example, for my daughter, she had difficulties grasping some math concept, and we did use some of the materials for her to understand better. And now she has a teacher who has a different kind of way of teaching, I think, and he seems to be more concrete in the way he teaches the children. So she has started to understand so many things this year and last year in maths, and thanks to that. So it's great to know that, because I think sometimes when you don't have a choice and you have to send your children to mainstream education, that's something that I recommend, maybe to complement with some of the Montessori materials to help the children to understand. And I know that some Montessori teachers become tutor for children to help them, even if they go to mainstream education, they can manipulate that materials and understand, exactly what is it.
Yeah, it helps everyone. There's even at our school, there's a support worker. So she works with students, not in Montessori, but in the other stream, because we're dual track. And she wants to become a teacher. So she's doing a prerequisite course at university. And she was having the hardest time with the math course. And I looked at it and I said, oh, just come to our class. I'll show you how to use the materials. And so I was able to show her what she needed to do using the Montessori materials. And just like that, she was like, oh, now I get it. So I think it can really help anyone. And a lot of people have a hard time with math in particular because it's so abstract. But as soon as they just do it one time, they use their hands, they understand. And then they can go back and do it abstractly.
Yeah, and that's very much a feeling that most parents had last week during that parenting conference, that if we had learned math that way, we would have enjoyed math.
Absolutely. Yes. A lot of people say that. I've helped with the training program, and teachers who come in to learn how to be Montessori teachers, they say the same thing. I hated math going through school. I didn't understand it. And it's almost a good opportunity for them to try again and to learn that it doesn't have to be that difficult. It can actually be very exciting and easier with the materials.
Absolutely. And even if I've done the 3 to 6 training, I was terrified by the math aspect of it because, yes, indeed, I didn't like math. I was not good at math in school. And even for the 3 to 6 qualification, I was like very afraid of failing. When we think about it, it's just the decimal system, so that should be okay. And then I had to really, and that's probably one of the aspects of the Montessori materials that I prefer. No, it's a math. It's a mathematics material because it's so well done, isn't it?
It is. It's amazing.
So another big aspect of the elementary curriculum is what we call the cosmic education, right? And the great lesson that seems to be very much a mystery. For people. And for you, I guess, with a history major, that must be a very interesting aspect, of the curriculum for you, and something that you probably enjoy teaching, I guess. Do you want to explain to us a bit more about what it is and, what's the purpose of it and everything else?
Sure. So cosmic education is just the way that we look at the whole first before we look at the parts. And it helps the child to understand where they are in the world, what part they make up of that huge universe. And so things are not, in the elementary program, things are not taught in isolation. We don't just do just history or just animals, or we kind of blend them together. And the great lessons are usually done at the lower elementary levels. So I haven't done them for a while. We definitely touch on them, but I haven't done it probably in 8 years. I haven't done a full lesson, but what they are stories with hands-on either experiments or visuals that help the children to spark their interest and imagination in big topics. So the first one is the story of the universe, which is basically the Big Bang Theory. And from there, children can research different things. So they can look at astronomy, they can look at physics. The next one is the coming of life. And so from there, they would study biology, botany, zoology. And then there's the coming of humans. So then they study timelines, ancient civilizations, which we start to do higher level, but they are introduced to it at the lower level. And then the next one is language and communication. So the story of how people started writing the alphabet, different types of alphabets throughout the ages, different alphabets that would be used in languages around the world. And then the last one is the story of math and geometry. So we do touch on it in the upper elementary level. I definitely remind them or ask them what they remember, but I haven't done the big, it can be like quite elaborate. It can be like a whole day thing when you tell it. So I haven't done that in a while, but it really sparks their interest in these big topics. And then they can go do research based on it.
Yeah. I know that at the moment, my son is in 2 timelines.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's very interesting because he has been a child who was deeply interested by geography, maps, and, animals of the world. And that was very much his topic. And it's like his center of interest for so many years, like since he's 2. And all of a sudden, it has shifted into history.
Yes.
And it's really, was it before Christ? Was it after Christ? That was the question we have all the time. Middle age before, is middle age after? So it's really into that and trying to figure out what is older, what is more recent, and with some interesting question about about my own childhood.
Right. Interesting.
Did we have television when we were little? Did you have a car? Maybe does it exist? We have this kind of question. So it's very interesting. And so, yeah, the interest has shifted. And with his own pocket money, he has bought himself some night sets to explore nights and middle age. So it's very interesting.
They love history. And the other thing about the cosmic education is Maria Montessori lived during 2 world wars. So she had a big part of her curriculum is peace education. And she really felt it was important that children understand that they're just part of this big system. And although they're just part of it, they can make a big change. And so that is part of the cosmic education as well. And the other thing I forgot to mention is with Montessori, which is different than traditional education, we start with the whole, and then they go slowly down to themselves. Whereas traditional education, like when I taught kindergarten, the ministry expectation was that you start with the child and then their family, then their community, then maybe Canada, and then the world. You go that way. But Montessori, you start with universe and then you go in. And so those are two different, I guess that's the difference with Montessori education at the higher level as well. We always start with the big picture and then we go further in.
Yeah, and the cosmic education is more for the second plane.
Yes,
while
definitely.
The 26, it's more concrete and what they are exposed to just around them. So it's a bit of a different approach. And it makes sense because children are interested, in the big world, right? When they enter the elementary years, the interest shift.
Absolutely. Yeah, my students are always wanting to know how they can help. What do we do in the community? What's going on in the world? They're really interested in global issues and not just based on themselves anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, that's something that has been constant with my two children. This what you say about being fair. What is fair and this kind of social justice.
Yeah.
And so we can definitely see that we have that possibility to raise a peacemaker of tomorrow.
Yes, absolutely.
Not maybe in a big way, like we're not maybe going to raise the next Gandhi or Mother Teresa, but in everyday life, I believe that parents and children are all peacemaker and have that opportunity, to raise empathic children for sure, and that has been a constant as well with all the guests here, as we have touched at a peace education every single time so far.
So, it's a huge part. It's a huge part of it.
Absolutely. And I think we have teachers watching, but we have majority are parents, and I think that's it might feel like a huge responsibility to think that your child is going to grow up into an adult that has to do something with his life, right? But I think that starts small. That starts with us being good role model and introduce them to what we can do every day to help the world to be a better place. And it doesn't have to be big and to be something that is anxious, that create anxiety for us. It's it's every day some simple steps to bring to have a better world, basically.
Absolutely. I agree. Like even in our class we're talking about sustainability, and so they're realizing just little things. If you take a granola bar wrapper and you throw it in the garbage, how many do you throw away per year? How many for our whole school do we throw away per year? How many for all of Vancouver? And so we do the math. And then so now I have students who say, I'm just going to bring a cookie that I made at home in a reusable container and I didn't throw away that one thing. And they realize, even like you said, it doesn't have to be big, but if they're realizing if they do a little bit themselves, it will add up. And they can make a change somehow.
We try to go when we go on a walk, we have those litter picker. And we tidy up. we pick litter, and sometimes it seems a bit pointless because you go the day after and you have litter as well. But when we started to do it on a regular basis, basically I think people start to see that there are no litters and they don't throw it. Or they tend, or you are a role model. You have people passing by wondering what you're doing, but then they realize what you're doing, so they're going to think twice next time they lose something from their pocket.
Yes, absolutely. It just takes a little change, right? Just change in habits, and like you said, the children can be role models for adults, right? The adults are noticing that the children are doing it, so they don't want to throw garbage on the ground.
Of course, and that's something that you can spread outside the Montessori school as well. I remember buying that book about act of kindness for my daughter for Christmas like 3 or 4 years ago, and she started that was just very simple act of kindness, like saying good things on little post-it notes and spreading these post-it notes around, and that was very cute. And she started to do that in her class, so she started to distribute, little notes to her friends and to all the children. And so people were like, oh, thank you. And that they didn't get it because she was the only one doing it, and it was very spontaneous. But some of them were very, touched by that, because she was giving them to everyone, not just to like a best friend or something.
Right.
So and she started also to she wanted to save the oceans from plastic. So she started to do those posters, and she asked us to copy those posters, with a printer. And then she used to go around the neighborhood distributing the papers to everybody, in the letterbox. And one day our neighbor came and said, he guessed that it was from us. We didn't leave a name or anything. And so he had a chat with the children, explaining what he was doing himself, and he wanted to show that he understood why they were doing that. So, and
fantastic.
I think that has an impact anyway on the long term, and that's something that you can do even if you don't have a Montessori school or whatever. So I think that's all these little gestures that parents can do. So another big part, obviously, of the Montessori education is independence, right?
Yes.
So in the first place, as you say, because children just want to do it all the time and repeat for the actions and for the process, it seems quite easy to nurture independence. At least they seem to be, they are highly motivated for that. But then in the second plane is different. So, the way we nurture independence in the second plane is a bit different. It's like it's the next step for them. So how do you nurture independence in the second plane? Or is it for you in the classroom, for the children in your classroom?
So when I think of independence, I think of, are they able to do things on their own? And so most of that comes back to a prepared environment and trust from the adult. Also having very clear expectations. So if I say, for example, you can do a project, go ahead and do it. And they go ahead and do it. And I say, oh no, I wanted the project on a poster. Why is it in a book? That's going to squash their confidence, and it's not going to help with their independence. They need to feel successful. So if I say, do a poster project and you need to have these things on there, then they can feel independent in doing it. They're not always questioning themselves. So I think in the elementary program, it's trust from the adult, expectations that are clear, and a prepared environment. And then giving the child lots of time to build that self-confidence that they can do it. And they will make mistakes, but learning from their mistakes as well is really important.
We cannot give up, basically. We have to keep going and keep giving them independence in the second plane. And it's not automatic, because we have given independence in the first plane, that they're going to be, totally independent in the second plane. I think that's still a process.
Parents have to give independence. Like, I have parents who will still carry their backpack for their child at 6 or 7, or they will return their library book for their child. Or even students in my class, their parents help them with things that they don't need to help them with. And then they say, why can't my child do this? They expect them to be independent in one area, but they haven't given them enough experience to be independent in areas that they can be. And so I think it's hard as a parent. You don't want to see your child feel uncomfortable, and you don't want your child to suffer or, be upset, but you do need to give them lots of practice at all ages of life.
For the parents of the children who goes to Montessori school, we still need to, give those parents a lot of information about how to support them at home.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. And I think for the parents whose children goes to mainstream education, that's probably something that teachers don't take into account. They don't discuss that with us at all. It's all about, the academics. And so for any parents who was interested by the Montessori education in the early years, it's really up to the parents to keep doing that job, to keep encouraging the children. It's not because our children go to school that we have nothing to do. I think we definitely so much in charge, and so important for children in terms of like that independence, that practical life, all the extra things that we can offer to our children. Having children in school then doesn't mean that our job is done at all.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, keep talking about independence and the elementary age group. I know that during that age group in the classroom, at least in the Montessori classroom, we start to give them more project, like they can go into the community and develop their own project. So it's normal to say that the children might go to some place, maybe not by themselves, but they will decide that they want to, go to the museum. So they will plan for that trip nearly without your help, I guess. And then you are there as a guide, and because you need to supervise, there is some laws that we have to respect. But basically, you tend to give them a lot of autonomy that way. And nowadays, I think that's harder and harder for parents to let the children, go somewhere by themselves, walk to the library, even if it's 10 minutes walk from the home. And we all wondering, at what age can I let my child, come back home by himself, or go there, or stay at the park for 1 hour? And it's very much a question that I'm asking myself a lot. I don't let my child walk to school by herself yet, and she's just 11, so it's like a bit, it's hard to give them the permission, because the world has changed, and my main difficulty is like there are no other children outside.
Right.
I compare to my own childhood, we were so many children outside all the time, and from different ages. So even if I was like 7, they were like children who were 15, who were like my neighbors. So I was not on my own with like children my age. We were a group of people, of children, not playing together, but they were like in the street, so they would do something if something was happening to me. And I do remember a time when I fell down and I hurt myself very badly. So basically one of my friends, who were like 3 or 4 years older, came to me and carried me home, and the other carried my bikes and some stuff. So I was definitely not on my own.
Right.
And I think that's something that we don't have. While I want to let my children play outside, I realize that they are the only two.
Right.
So it's very hard. And I know there are other children in the neighborhood, so they just don't go out. So it's very hard to give them the autonomy. So I don't know if you have any tips, if you're wondering about that yourself, because one day, Layla will be at that age, and I feel that it's very difficult questions to answer, but I don't know if you have any, pointers for us. Knowing that
it's hard. Yeah, it's really hard. So I have some students from my school that walk to school, but most of them don't walk to school by themselves. Most of them are quite scheduled. So their parents, they just time-wise, their parents have to pick them up, get them to a class, get them to another class. The parents work really late, so they're not always there to supervise. I was talking to my mom, and she said her dad was in the military, so he was based in Tokyo. And when my mom was 8 years old, she went with her younger sister downtown Tokyo from the military base. And my dad's stories are like, they just went all over town. They would bike places. They came home for dinner, and they were fine. They survived. They got these real life experiences. When I was in elementary school, I didn't have the freedom to do all of that. I took the bus to school, and I took the bus to my mom's work often. But I think you're right. The world has changed. So it is hard. And in different communities, it's going to feel different. But I think a way that you can give your child autonomy is to have baby steps, because I think it is hard for parents, right, to just be always there, and then all of a sudden, okay, you bus to school. So some parents in my class, I've suggested they could drop their child 2 blocks away from school, and they can walk. And then they start to drop them off 3 blocks away and 4 blocks away. And that just helps the parent as well, because we're all learning to be parents, from day one when our child's born. We're not experts at it. And so I think sometimes it's hard for parents to let go, but your child usually is ready before you are. That's what I've noticed. It's the parents that hold their kids back. And there are different reasons for that, just safety issues, the concern about the child, but usually the child's ready to go. So I don't have any big tips, but I think baby steps is the best way. And to break down, what are the things that you're worried about? Are you worried about safety? Are you worried that your child's not going to know how to cross the road? And so coming up with a plan on how to feel comfortable, both for you and your child, so your child can feel safe, but also feel independent. Because we want them to be independent adults. And if they are always second guessing themselves, and they feel like they don't have the capability to do something, it's going to be hard for them when they're an adult to go out and get a job and be successful.
Yeah, I know that when my daughter was younger and we had moved to this town, and she started to know the way to go to the library. And I used to let her walk, ahead of me, letting her know, you're ahead of me, I see you, so you can walk. You can walk up to the library. You know the way. So that was a way to give her the confidence that she could remember the way. But I was still there because she was like probably 7. And but that's something that I used to do quite a lot when we were at first moved in. That she could know the way to the library, but I was there because
that's great.
And it was quite hard to let her go by herself. But it's a kind of baby steps that you can do that gives them the confidence that they have to think about the way, basically, about how to go there and when do I cross and these kind of things. But at the same time, you are there, so it's safe. It's safe for you, it's for them, basically. That was a way. When I go to playground, sometimes I'm most often what I do, I take my book and I don't pay attention to whatever they do. So I just say to them, you're coming back to me, when you need something.
That's great.
Because when your children are very little, we tend to like being just next to the slide and they don't need us normally, but we are worried because they're very young. So as they grow, I started to really say, okay, I'm sitting there because they don't want me to play with them anyway at that age, and go anywhere as long as you stay in the park, that's fine. Coming back, and at first it was a bit stressful for me because after 10 minutes, I start to look around and I don't see them. And I start to go around and I don't see them. And then finally I found them, behind the hill, is they still in the park, but they find those little places when they can hide. But, at least that gives them a sense of freedom, the minimum sense of freedom we can give them within, when we live in a town and when there are no children around, I think. So it was at least one way to do it. And, definitely also, as you say, knowing when they are ready. For example, the sleepover, my son's best friend asked him to come for a sleepover and we didn't know if he would be able to go, but we asked him and he said that he wanted to go. So we explained to him what will be the process, that if he was waking up in the middle of the night, I wouldn't be there. So he had to know that it's not going to be me who was going to be able to comfort him, but his friend's mom. So he went, he was very happy to go. And the day after, he couldn't stop at breakfast saying, I did it, I did my sleepover, I did it. And he was so proud of himself that, the parents just messaged us saying, he's so proud, he's so happy, he slept over. And no, he went back again, and now he has a school trip that is 2 nights away, and he's going. So he's so proud of himself to be able to go. So
that's great.
It was all his own, desire. We didn't push, we didn't, make him sleep over at anyone else's houses, for own convenience, because, we never asked for that. And so it's just really following him. So I see some people saying some comments about that are quite interesting, and trying to see if I can show it to everybody. So I look at my own childhood compared to what my kids are growing up in, and it's so different. Yes, brought up to sort yourself out and walk to school through a park. And as you say, like with your mom, growing up in Tokyo, and that was not an issue. And I remember my dad keep telling us that memory he has of his own childhood. He was like 6, and my grandmother sent him to the local shop to bring some milk or something like that. So that was his first trip, but he was 6 years old and he had to walk. It was a straight line. It was in the middle of the countryside. And, obviously it was in the 50s. So there were not so many cars, but still he was 6, and there was like 2 or 3 houses between his house and the shop. And it was probably not 1 mile, but bit less, but my grandmother calculated that shouldn't take him more than half an hour, and an hour and a half later he was still not there, because basically there was one house with one of his friends, and he stopped at that house to play with a little girl and never made it to the shop, basically because he was 6, so obviously on the way.
Yeah, you got distracted.
But it was like, he was 6, and I'm not thinking about that. My son is 6. He's probably in that same walking distance to the shop, and
Right.
never it would cross my mind to send him to the shop to get milk.
Yeah.
Never. And the other day we were watching E.T., the movie.
Yeah.
And the little girl, she made a bath for her brother in one of the scenes of the movie. And she's 5, the little girl, the younger sister. And my daughter was watching the movie with me, and she said, I'm not even sure I can do the bath properly for myself.
Yeah.
And she's doing the bath for, for a baby brother. Yeah, she takes a bath by herself, don't worry. But she struggles sometimes to turn off the tap because her taps are so complicated. But she was like, the realization that the little girl was 5 and was taking care of her brother, it was like, wow.
I know. It's so different.
Yeah, it is different. Yeah. So, one of my other questions, that's a question that I've asked everyone. So we're jumping into something else. It's like, do you have a favorite Montessori quote?
I think my favorite quote is never help a child with a task at which he feels he can succeed. I think that I just love it so much because I think it's really good for any age, even for adults. If I think I can do something, it almost takes that away. It takes the importance away if someone just comes in and does it for me. So I always try to stop, take a couple moments if Layla looks like she's struggling with something, as long as she's physically safe. I give her time, even if she's really frustrated. And then I might say, do you need help, or can I help you? And then that at least gives her the power to say yes, help, or no. But if I just come in and do everything for her, I'm not giving her that chance to try on her own. And most of the time she does do fine. I just have to give her that space.
You said something important here. It's like taking the time to observe.
Absolutely. And it's hard. It's not easy. It's hard, but it's so important.
So I don't know if in your own training you have been told to do that as well. When you need to take 2 minutes to observe, it's like really sit on your hands.
Yes.
And literally that's what we are advised to do, is like to really put your hands under your legs and not doing anything. Otherwise you're going to, your hands are itching to help the child. It's feeling like a natural urge that we have to help physically a child. But if we take the time to observe, most of the time they will be able to do it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you just have to give that time, and it's so hard. But even in my classroom, if there's something like a disagreement, I really I struggle daily to not jump in and to let them see. And 95% of the time, they figure it out themselves. If there's a student who's walking around in circles and I want to say, what are you doing? Let's get back to work. I count to 30. They've gone back to work. It seems like a long time, but they usually do what they need to do. Unless something's unsafe, I try to let them do it themselves.
Yeah, and it's reassuring as well, that you are a teacher, I am a teacher, and we still struggle with that. So it's fine.
Absolutely.
When we are for the parents who are listening, it's fine if you cannot do it every time. It's fine if you slip your child's coat. Just maybe tomorrow, think before you do it and let them try. And obviously, it's also important in that quote to know that at the task, you feel your child can succeed. So it's important to make sure that it's something that he can do it, that he can do, because sometimes you can also be on the other side of the spectrum thinking, I let my child doing it and your child is struggling and that's much too challenging. So we need to break down the task that it's just enough challenge for the child, but not too difficult either.
Absolutely.
And that brings to the other importance of the Montessori system is the scaffolding, basically, from simple to more complex. And, it's up to us, the parents at home, to make the task easier.
Right.
Like if we want our children to be able to make their own breakfast, they first need to be able to pour themselves a drink. So first, and then after they need to know where are all the stuff they need for the breakfast.
Right.
It needs to be prepared. And, it's a lot of steps, for any kind of task we want them to be independent with. There are a lot of steps involved that we need to work on one by one, basically.
Yes.
Yeah. So another question, so the last question to finish this talk, is about self-care. That's something that I've asked all our guests.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as a young parent, self-care can totally go out of the window.
Yes.
Because we don't have time. It's hard to make the time. And we might feel also that it's like our children are more important. So we need to be there for them no matter what. And whatever our needs are, the needs that will come later. But no, I suppose Layla is 2. It might become more easier. It might
Yes.
be easier for you to think about yourself. And so I would like you to share, what do you do for your self-care routine? What is important for you? What helps you basically to be the best parent you can be?
Well, I realized about myself that I am someone who really needs my own space. I'm an introvert. So when I'm at work all day with children and the noise and the movement, it drains me. And I think before Layla, it was fine because I would go work out or go home and it would be okay. But now I come home and she has a lot of energy and she wants my attention. So the things I've tried to do is just take time for myself, even if it's 5 minutes. I started doing meditation with an app that I do just for 5 minutes at recess. I do it after school. The other thing I do is I read a lot more than I did before while she's playing. So when she's playing, like you said, you would read at a park. She doesn't need me to interact with her all the time when she's playing. So I can sit and read a book that I'm interested in, and that's my self-care. And also sleep. I try to sleep as much as possible, which is hard.
That's for sure. I think for parents with very young children, that might be the greatest goal.
Yeah, I'm always tired. People are like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "This is my face now. I am just always tired, but I'm getting
You don't show that you're tired.
You. Thank you. Well, I always have coffee or tea, so that's also self-care for me.
Yeah. Now, I would love to say that you start to sleep when your children are older. Definitely, my children sleep through the night.
Yeah.
But, we have, a new baby is a business, I would say like that. And it takes a lot of our time and our evening for sure. So I think, when I've been told that when the children are older and they start to go out and everything, then you don't sleep through either.
Right.
You don't know where are your children.
Exactly. They're teenagers. You don't know where they are. You stay up. I know. I think you're just always tired, but I'm getting used to it now, I think.
Yeah. 2 years in, so 3 years in nearly. So you're getting used to it. So we have a few watching. I know there was a question about a specific math material, so I will put that up.
Okay.
While you say, because maybe you're going to be able to explain what it is. It was a question about the 10 frame. And wondering about that, about as a beginner resource. So I think that's from Victoria. So if you want to explain, Victoria, if you're still watching, how old your child is for that activity. I think she has a little boy who is like 4, no, or maybe 3. So I suppose it's not really what we would start with.
I think so. Is this the 10 boards, like the Sagan boards? I'm wondering, or
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's definitely a good resource to understand the symbols of numbers with the quantity of numbers. I don't think it is a necessity. I'm not sure if she's asking for homeschooling or what, but I mean, it's definitely all materials are amazing. All Montessori materials are amazing. I think you can DIY a lot of them. Like Maria Montessori made the materials as she was going. A lot of them are possible to DIY. And I know you talked about that during the other talk. And there's lots of resources about how to do that. There are some materials that I would not DIY just because they have to be very precise. Those materials are more when they get older. So if you are trying to do, or like some of the sensorial materials like the binomial cube and trinomial cube, you would probably be better off just purchasing them because they have to be quite precise to be able to get the result that you want to show the child. But the 10 frame, you could DIY it, I think, or you could purchase it.
Yeah, it's quite easy to do even with cardboard if you don't.
Yes.
Set to wood, it's kind of an easy one to do. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, well, she explained a bit further. So it's nearly 4 and love numbers and letters. Well, it depends what you have done before as well, you know, because there is all the decimal system. So I don't know where you are in that decimal system right now, Victoria, because there are stuff to do before that, obviously, like the number rods and the spindle box and the card encounters, which are all doable, you know, do it yourself as well, those one, and, you know, and progress through the curriculum. And yeah, because some children are so much into numbers, and even if they go to preschool, they don't have that access to that material. Yeah. So I totally understand the desire to, you know, introduce the math materials. And for me, you know, the sensory materials was a great addition, because basically if you don't go to a Montessori preschool, you know, in any of the preschools, you're never going to have that kind of specific access, you know, access to that specific sensorial materials and that sensorial education. So, and it's really during the early years that it's valuable to have access to all those materials.
For sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I do believe that's a great addition. And yeah, it's more expensive, but, you know, many toys nowadays, you know, that parents spend money on are expensive as well. So it's a matter of taste or what you want your children to be exposed to. When I see those beautiful, you know, Waldorf toys, like the rainbow and everything, they are as expensive as the Montessori material. So personally, when my children were little, obviously I bought the Montessori materials.
And the great thing is you can always resell them. I mean, at least in Vancouver, you can resell them. And most Montessori materials, if you purchase them and you're doing homeschooling, for example, you can use them for so many years. Like the stamp game, you probably in preschool, some children get the stamp game. I use it with my class. So, you know, it's depending on the materials. I think you're getting a really good cost per use, not everything. And you can obviously DIY, like you know, for preschool, the fabric boxes and the sound cylinders, you can do those. But there are certain sensitive periods that children go through. That's why the sensorial is so important for under 6, because they're in that sensitive period. And when they're older, they don't necessarily need that, right? Yeah,
absolutely. So yeah, so it's giving me more information, and I do know a bit, Victoria, so that's quite, I kind of guess why you're asking those questions. So yeah, I would say that if it's just know in the numbers, you know, just make sure that if you know these numbers, you know, you have done the sandpaper numbers or something similar, you recognize the symbols. So I would go with the number rods and symbols to start with. And so a way to make it less expensive would be to buy the small number rods, because the big number rods sometimes is too expensive, but the small number rods, if you have that material, then you can go further and do the additions with that and subtraction with that. So it's quite interesting to have. And yeah, that's what I would do for the next steps. I don't know if you want to add something about that.
Well, I mean, that's definitely probably first plane. I would not do that second plane, but for 4 years old, there are a lot of mini materials, like you're saying, that you can purchase that are a lot cheaper. They take up less space, and they'll still give the experiences that your child needs to understand numbers.
Yeah, I think we need to be flexible when it's in the house. It doesn't have to be a classroom. It doesn't have to be the full set of materials. And, you know, just really go with what your child is interested in. You do not need to, you know, to purchase a whole set of materials. Definitely not. Yeah. Okay. So, well, it was absolutely lovely to have you on this call. I really enjoyed chatting with you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, that was a pleasure. Thank you.